So in the offseason, we talked about the possibilities of NFL first to worst teams. And one of the teams we discussed was the Bengals. And that discussion led us into a breakdown of each contender's backup quarterback. And here in week 3, we're already talking about Jake Browning as Joe Burrow battles with a calf injury. Kyle, knowing what we know so far, not knowing whether Joe Burrow's even going to play in week 3, how do you think the Bengals should manage his injury moving forward?
So this is an interesting situation because the Bengals would normally be one of those teams that I think is good enough that the regular season is all about preparing for the postseason, that they will be good enough to make the playoffs regardless of having players miss a couple of games. But I don't know if that's the case this year for the Bengals. I mean, now they're already 0-2 to start the season. Now Cincinnati finds themselves in a tough situation where they are trying to fight off a really good division in a really good conference, losing 2 games that under normal circumstances we would think that Cincinnati would win, right? Like saying Cincinnati would be 2-0 at the bare minimum 1-1, given the teams that they've played to start the season so far. But now that they find themselves at 0-2 against Cleveland and a home game against Baltimore, I mean, I'm looking up now and thinking they might not be able to withstand an injury to that one player specifically. Maybe if they lost like an Orlando Brown, they'd be able to withstand. Even if they lost a T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, they might be able to pull through. If it's not Burrow, as much as I want to believe in Folsom High School, Sacramento's own Jake Browning, he grew up like 10 minutes that way from where I'm recording right now. Even as much as I want to believe in Jake Browning, like I don't know if they'll be able to withstand that injury with an 0-2 start, a game against the Rams on Monday night that puts them in a really difficult situation. If they lose on Monday, potentially without Joe Burrow, and even if Burrow comes back and they have to go 10-4 the rest of the season to make the playoffs, that's a tall task even for a team that's been to 2 consecutive AFC championship games.
So the injury to Joe Burrow happened within the last 3 plays of the game. Knowing what we know now, hindsight being 2020, we look at Jamar Chase's comments in the offseason about Joe Burrow maybe should have sat out the first couple of weeks of the season. Now that we can evaluate Jamar Chase's comments with the hindsight, knowing that they went 0-2 anyway with a healthy Joe Burrow, do you think they made a mistake in not putting him on the bench at least to start the season?
I feel like healthy Joe Burrow should be taken with like a bunch of air quotes right there, because clearly he wasn't healthy. Like he played awful in the first game of the season, came into the second game, played not as terrible, but also not great, and then re-aggravated his calf injury, which the calf is kind of connecting the Achilles tendon up through to the back of your leg. So like clearly Joe Burrow wasn't healthy, but Joe Burrow was also making it pretty clear he was going to play. It reminds me so much of back 4 years ago, and to use a basketball analogy, when Kevin Durant injured his Achilles and during that playoff run for the Warriors, he sat out, and then the Warriors were down 3-1 in the finals to Toronto, and he tried to push it back. Doctors probably shouldn't have cleared him, but they cleared him anyways. And then he tore his Achilles 12 minutes into the game. It's like, yes, you probably need more rest. You probably need more recovery. And the thing with the calf Achilles injury is that you just don't know the timelines for those injuries. It's a combination of soft tissue and connecting the tendons. So you've got like 3 things you got to work with. Even though I'm not a doctor, I think the evidence is pretty clear. Jamar Chase was probably right. Joe Burrow should have sat the first couple games of the season, and bygones be bygones if they lose those games anyways, because now you're 0-2 and your quarterback is now even more hurt than he was before.
Now, I was listening to a sports doctor talk about it, and he said with this type of injury, one of the big things they can do is at least put like one of those sleeves over the calf, and that can help manage it. The big key here is apparently keeping it warm. However, the big risk that the Bengals find themselves in is, okay, let's say they do run him out there on Monday night. If he does have any tweaks or re-aggravations with that thing, then we may be talking about the IR anyway. And if he gets put on the IR, you're going to miss 4 games. And when you look at the Bengals, like next stretch of games, I mean, at a certain point, the math just stops favoring you because you're already 0-2, so you're behind the 8 ball now. How good is this Bengals team to really survive with Jake Browning for a couple weeks? And listen, I know I'm one to talk here as a Niners fan who had Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, come in and save the team. But when I look at like 2019 undrafted quarterback Jake Browning, again, like when we were doing the exercise of talking to backup quarterbacks around the league, I didn't even know who the hell Jake Browning was. It threw me off when you even like could pull what college he played for. The Bengals maybe should have considered like upgrading their backup quarterback position, but apparently Jake Browning earned his spot. Now, I think everyone's a little bit more on high alert this year when we talk about calf injuries, just given what happened in week 1. if Aaron Rodgers didn't literally tear his Achilles in week 1 after dealing with calf issues in the offseason, then I don't think we'd be talking about this nearly as much. And there's certain things to consider, like one, Aaron Rodgers is a older player than Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow too is also a player that has had an injury history. Let's not forget he literally blew up his knee in the first year of his NFL career. So evaluating this Bengals team, like you're going into this week 3 game against the Rams, who the Rams are a lot better than we thought they were going to be. If a doctor says, yeah, he can play, but there are going to be some minor limitations.
Which doctor is telling me that? Because if it's the team doctor, take it with a grain of salt. If it's his personal doctor, take it with a grain of salt, because there's so many incentives for Burrow to get back on the field if he wants to get back on the field. And this is a position where maybe the organization steps in and says, we need to do right by this player and keep him off the field. Similar situation to what Mike Tomlin was talking about in the offseason with Ryan Clark and how he held Ryan Clark out of a game he wanted to play. Problem is, the Bengals are not necessarily regarded as an organization that is necessarily at the highest standards of caring for their players historically. This is the organization that reused jock straps in the early 2000s. It's a real story. You can look it up. The Bengals are not exactly the team I trust to do right by their quarterback. And of course, Joe Burrow wants to play because that's the reason Joe Burrow was in the first place when he clearly wasn't healthy enough to do so. So to answer your question, which doctor is clearing him is a bigger question than whether or not doctors give him the go-ahead for a primetime Monday night game against the Los Angeles Rams.
The second part of that question is like, do you think the Bengals are a good enough team if Joe Burrow, let's say they do have to put him on IR or something, and he has to miss 4 games. Are they a good enough team to survive a 4-game stretch without their star quarterback, especially given their 0-2 status already?
I mean, it's like I said earlier, you would suspect that a team in the AFC who made it to 2 consecutive AFC championship games, made the Super Bowl 2 years ago, didn't really lose any significant pieces on that defense I mean, the offensive side of the ball, you could say they added an offensive lineman and that should help. But like, other than losing Jesse Bates and Von Bell and being able to replace them with relatively good options, like they haven't lost like major pieces of the team. And so I feel a little strange saying that they're not good enough to. But then I look at the practical like results and I don't know if they're good enough. It's like I said earlier, going 10-4 is a tall task, period, especially when you're playing in the AFC and particularly the AFC North with the first place schedule, because they won their division last year. So they have to play Kansas City. They have to play Buffalo. They have to play Jacksonville. So 10-4 is a tall task for any team. And to do it with Jake Browning at quarterback, who has completed 0 NFL passes. I mean, like I said, Jake Browning's a local kid, high school hero who played a college football playoff game at Washington a bunch of years ago, but 10-4 with Jake Browning just sounds like a tall task, even for this Bengals team.
He's got a wealth of experience. He's been in the league 4 years, 4 snaps. 4 total snaps for Jake Browning in that time. So that's not exactly someone you just want to throw into the game, which again brings up the question, why didn't the Bengals consider upgrading their backup quarterback position in the offseason so that they wouldn't be put in necessarily the spot where it seems like their season is on the line, all on the arm of one inexperienced 4th-year quarterback in Jake Browning. When I break down the team aside from the quarterback position, so a quote that kind of caught my eye was that Jamar Chase was talking about the play calling and how the Bengals weren't taking enough shots downfield and we're doing a little bit more dink and dunk. I kind of wonder, so you mentioned, was Joe Burrow healthy to begin this season? Do you think that was any limitations in their decision to throw downfield, given maybe Joe Burrow just doesn't have the push off that calf like he normally would?
That's a good question. I didn't go back to watch any tape from the Ravens-Bengals game, but from what I was catching on the Red Zone channel, it seemed like that might be the case. I know fantasy people have been asking questions about what's happening with Jamar Chase and what's happening with his production this year. And I think Joe Burrow right now is ranked like 28th out of 33 quarterbacks in terms of, I think it was passer rating. He's 28 out of 33 right now.
Well, that Browns game definitely killed them. That killed the whole team in general, that week 1 just disaster class that they threw on.
Yeah, so I guess in that respect, I have to assume he's not healthy, because I don't think of him as being in the same camp as Zach Wilson or the same camp as Justin Fields in terms of performance this year, or surprisingly Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence was like 26th in passer rating this year, but I of course it's Joe Burrow. We expect Joe Burrow to be better than this. So I guess I have to just assume that the offense was inhibited by the fact. I also don't really trust Zac Taylor as an offensive coach. I know he doesn't call the plays. I know it's Callahan, I think his name is Brian Callahan. I know he calls the plays, but I don't really trust them schematically. They've run a very basic offense for a lot of years, even with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. But I have to assume that injuries played a factor in their game plan here, just based on the fact that they were unable to move the ball down the field, the fact that Joe Burrow clearly was battling through injury. I don't think it takes a genius to like make the connection between the two and think that there might have been something inhibiting there. And this Jamar Chase guy's a smart person. He seems to be onto a lot of the stuff that recognizing what's wrong with the Bengals. Jamar Chase seems to have the basic answers. Our quarterback is hurt, and because our quarterback is hurt, we can't run the offense we want to run.
Now, you mentioned Zac Taylor. I just want to ask a quick question. So what does it say about Zac Taylor, at least the last 2 years, that they've started 0-2 twice? So again, something bright side for the Bengals fans here. You did start 0-2 last year and still made the AFC Championship game. But this year, obviously, with the Joe Burrow injury, a little bit different. But what does it say about Zac Taylor that this team is just used to slow starts coming into the season? Are they kind of the new Patriots? Like, we treat September as an extra preseason?
Your guess is as good as mine with that one, because look, I've said for a couple of years now that the thing that would help improve the Bengals the most is a top of the line coach. Like, if a top of the line coach was willing to go to that organization, I think that would do wonders for the Cincinnati Bengals. I have recommended Mike Vrabel get out of Tennessee and go to Cincinnati in the past. It doesn't necessarily have to be him, but just if any top of the line coach went to Cincinnati, I think you'd see marked improvement from the team. Zac Taylor, to me, has shown little evidence that he is good or bad as a coach, but the thing that I will give him credit for is, unlike some other coaches with very good teams, he hasn't driven the whole thing off a cliff yet. So at the very least, he is stable. He is not driving the whole wagon off a cliff, but he also isn't really doing much to help his team in terms of the coaching and schematics and running any kind of offense that isn't just what Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase ran in college. And I know, again, part of that's Brian Callahan, who's the offensive coordinator calling the plays, but just them as an offensive. I was surprised when Callahan was getting head coaching interviews last year. I was like, really? I know everyone's trying to find the next offensive genius, but this team is not that. They run a remarkably simple offense. It's very similar spread formations to what every team in the NFL now is starting to implement. So again, the 0-2 thing I think is less indicative of Taylor specifically, but you don't need to give me more evidence to bag on Zac Taylor, because for years I have thought that this person is not, at the very least, if he is an NFL head coach, he shouldn't have the keys to this Maserati of a football team. Please let him go coach like the Bears or something like that. Don't give him like one of the most talented rosters in the NFL, when the best thing I can say about him is he hasn't driven the whole thing off a cliff. Even if he's made some boneheaded coaching decisions, timeout decisions, clock management stuff, but like coaches do that all the time. The best thing I can say about him, hasn't driven the whole thing off a cliff, but we might see that this year. 6-11 season with Jake Browning behind the helm, and they finished last place in the AFC North, and they're going to start asking some questions that maybe people in Cincinnati haven't been asking the last couple of years.
Well, I would say if Jake Browning does play significant time, Zac Taylor is going to at least have the out, hey, my quarterback was injured all year, right?
I guess, but you know what the solution is to this? There's a backup quarterback right now that's available on the open market. He's not really getting playing time for.
Is he a former first-round pick?
Quarterback. He is a former second-round pick, actually.
Okay.
A former second rounder with some experience in this offense behind Zac Taylor. I'm talking, of course, about Andy Dalton, baby. Red Rifle. Reunite him with the Cincinnati Bengals. Trade for Andy Dalton and reunite him with this incredible. Give him the best Bengals team he's ever had in his career, so he can also lose in the wild card game again.
All roads lead back to Andy Dalton. All right, guys. Well, what do you think? How have the Bengals done in managing this Joe Burrow injury to this point? How should they manage it moving forward? Can they dig out of another 0-2 hole to begin the year? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias. From Juju and Kyle, stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.